This is Mammoth Daily.
Well, I think we did a great thing where we are added to our group, with Mackenzie Weegar and bringing him on board and being able to kind of take that next step as a team and add a really, high quality player that can play in our top four and make a difference every night for us. I think that it sends a message to the group that there's a belief about our team and where we're going. So it was an important deadline for us. At the same time, I always say this, our best team is not here yet. And so we had to make sure at the same time that we didn't give away the future with some of our elite prospects that we've drafted over the years, along with, some high-end picks that we still have as an organization. So I think we tried to accomplish two things and protect the future and at the same time get better as a team, as an organization. I think we accomplished that.
Welcome into Mammoth Daily. It's the closest thing we've ever had to an emergency edition of our show. Mike Folta, Adrian Denny here with you. We're your Hockey Night Utah radio crew. We'll touch on to tomorrow's game against Columbus, Saturday's game against the Blue Jackets. It's a big one as both teams continue to establish position in the playoff race. But AD, we got to talk trade deadline. That's why we're dropping this pod when we are, a little bonus pod for our day-to-dayers, those who can't get enough. And those who are following the trade deadline had a lot of stuff go down around the league. Of course, the Utah Mammoth on what was that, Wednesday night, acquired Mackenzie Weegar. That's when the news broke. So a big splash there made by General Manager Bill Armstrong. But as you were taking in the news and monitoring the Twitter situation, AD, what struck you? What were your big impressions from one of the tentpole days on the NHL calendar?
You know what, Mike, as we started to get later in the day on Friday, approaching that 1 p.m. Mountain Time deadline, I thought, you know what I think we have here? I think the Mammoth have what they want. And they made the one deal. They got Mackenzie Weegar. And Bill Armstrong kind of echoed it when he met with the media after the deadline. The asking price for a lot of the names you heard were so exorbitant that it made it an easy decision to cash out and move on with Mackenzie Weegar and the hockey club you have and the prospects you have and the draft capital that you have. So I think it's a huge testament to, first of all, the prospects, the drafting and developing process that Bill Armstrong's team has done to get to this point, to have players that are in juniors right now leading their respective leagues in points per game, that they're part of our future right now. We're not parting ways with those guys, and there's some good names out there, but we've got our plan. We made an addition for a very fair price that worked for our organization, but beyond that, we like what we have and excited to move forward tomorrow and into the rest of the future.
Yeah, was listening to Bill talk with Scotty and friends on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone, and he kind of stirred this in my head because I knew a lot of the prospects were doing well, but Bill mentioned they're some of the top scorers in each of their respective leagues. So I went and looked it up, tweeted this out. Cole Baudouin, second in the OHL in terms of points per game. TJ Ginla, first in the WHL in points per game. Caleb Denoye, second in the QMJHL in points per game. So those are your three of your biggest prospects, three of your biggest assets that you didn't want to walk away on. We heard the Utah Mammoth in talks with St. Louis about Robert Thomas. We heard about Utah being in talks with Vincent Trocheck early on. Didn't sound like that was incredibly promising, but again, the asking price just too much, and at some point you got to be able to walk away. Let's hear from Bill, AD, on protecting that young core that you mentioned.
Listen, you have to look at everything while you're out there. There were some high names being put out there and into the deadline this year, and we wanted to explore them. We wanted to make sure that we were in on them, and at the same time, there's a little bit of a patience with this, and there's a little bit of discipline as you go down the stretch. No different than a free agency. We've always kind of tried to do smart things with the club and make sure that it all lines up together, and that's That's not always easy because sometimes there's stuff that's put in front of you, but at the same time, we've got some great young talent coming into this organization. And you look last night, Dmitry Simashev played in our organization, and last night he had a heck of a game, and you can just see the development in 1 year as he's come through. And there's a patience level with our group, and sometimes we sign particular players to come in to help us take that next step, but at the same time they're also buying time for our young players to develop. So it's really been a good year in that sense, and we I think at this deadline we accomplished both things.
So that was Bill talking about just the strength of Utah's future assets, and why sacrifice all of that just for the new shiny toy, right? Robert Thomas, a great player, would be great to have, would make this team better right away, but at the price that St. Louis was asking for, too steep a climb for Bill Armstrong. So the Mammoth hang on with Mackenzie Weegar. One of the bigger moves, AD, at the deadline that was made by anybody.
It could have been the biggest move at the deadline. We talked about it on Wednesday night, probably the third biggest trade in the NHL this year. And Mike, another way to look at it is your window for right now. Are you going to win a Stanley Cup this year? Do teams go from making the playoffs the first time to winning the Stanley Cup in the first year? Not usually, not likely. So two things, Mike. You're looking at, you're adding a player, but are the players that you're being asked to part with in terms of prospects, draft capital, etc., is this player going to have a better career with your organization than what you have, right? So that's number one. And for me, with the prospects that Utah deemed untouchable, I don't think you can say that anybody you would have brought in would have had a better career with your organization from a percentage standpoint than what you're expecting from those point-of-game guys in your pipeline. Number two, Mike, you part ways with a first-round draft pick for a rental, and that's going to get you from, game 6 of a first-round series to game 7 to the second round, if you're lucky. We saw teams like Detroit and Anaheim part ways with first-round draft picks. Do we see those teams in kind of the same situation as Utah, looking to get back to the playoffs for the first time? And how far are you going to go? How far? What's your forecast? So that a first rounder is a lot to pay for a guy on an expiring contract for a team looking to get back to the playoffs. And on that first year back to the playoffs, are you likely to advance past round 1? And look what you just gave up. And for the Mammoth, Mike, I feel good about this team. On Friday's episode, the analytics we talked about in November and December, they've come to fruition right now in the team defense and the successful brand of hockey that works in the playoffs that they're playing in. But I think it's a lot for that first run into the playoffs to give up a first rounder.
So you mentioned rentals. Let's bring up some of the rentals. Big one, obviously. The biggest, maybe the most shocking news of trade deadline day or trade deadline eve, depending on where you were in the world. John Carlson of the Washington Capitals going to Anaheim for a first-round pick and a third-round pick. Now, Anaheim, similar to Utah, a lot of prospects, a lot of picks, but still, Carlson, a UFA at the end of the year, and boy, that's a big price tag. Now, he's a great player. He's a great player, but that's quite a haul there for Washington to bring in. We also saw St. Louis just going through some of the bigger deals, AD. Trade away their captain, Braden Shen. Thought this was probably the best deal that the Blues made, getting a first, a third, a prospect, and Jonathan Drouin back for Braden Shen, who's on pace for like 40 points this year. They also traded defenseman Justin Falk for a first, a third, plus. So they didn't move Kyrou, they didn't move Thomas, but they moved those guys and got a couple first-round picks.
So you get kind of the asking price that they were expecting for their players to part ways with, and for Utah cashing out. And let's hear from Bill, Mike, just on the discipline. You're at the table and you've got a deadline, and what do you do?
Sometimes other clubs make that easy on you because of the simple fact of their ask and what they're doing, and it would deplete your entire organization, and you're not going to do that. So sometimes the ask for some of the elite players that were available it wasn't even questioned that we'd do that as an organization, because a year from now it wouldn't make the organization any better. So I think some of the asks made it a lot easier for us to stay disciplined, but we've stayed disciplined the whole time through, and we continue to do that, and you can see our team grow.
So you had Braden Shen going to the New York Islanders, Justin Falk going to the Detroit Red Wings. Kind of fun. Nick Foligno goes to play with his brother Marcus in Minnesota. So great work by Kyle Davidson of Chicago, able to send Nick over to Minnesota and play for a cup. So love those moves. Connor Garland traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets from Vancouver. He is not going to be, we expect he's not going to be in the lineup tonight because of those same immigration issues that's keeping Mackenzie Weegar out of the lineup.
Do you know what, though, Mike? Here's something I was going to bring up in today's immigration lesson. He's an American playing for the Vancouver Canucks, coming to
he's
an American team. Scituate, Massachusetts, baby. So as soon as Connor Garland can get to Columbus, he's good to go.
And they were on the road in Chicago, so it wasn't like a long trip for him to join the Blue Jackets. Okay, good point. That's why we keep you around. I think he knew Charlie Coyle growing up, perhaps another Massachusetts guy. So
you're right, correct.
Buffalo made a bunch of moves. They brought in a bunch of like fourth line, third pair type guys who were almost all rentals. Tanner Pearson, Logan Stanley, Luke Shen, and Sam Carrick. They're all on expiring deals except Carrick. And they gave up a bunch of picks and a bunch of their young guys. Thought that was really interesting with Buffalo swinging and missing on Colton Parayko when he refused to waive his no trade clause.
And the Sabres wouldn't comment on that, Mike, but boy, that's a gut punch when you feel like you got a deal to bring in a player like that. You talk about discipline, and everybody knows you didn't get him. And was there some additional pressure on Buffalo? Because that's another team tied for first place in the Atlantic Division right now. Best team in the NHL since December, but still a young team. What's their window? They're giving it a swing, and they gave away some assets.
So running through some of the deals the Western Conference made, AD, I feel like a lot of the biggest moves came from teams in the West. You had LA, who was kind of all over the map. They acquired Scott Laughton for Toronto, but they also traded away Warren Fogle to Ottawa, got a couple picks, traded away Corey Perry to Tampa. So interesting maneuvering there from Ken Holland and the Kings. Just going to run through these. Staying in the Pacific, Vegas picks up Nick Dowd from Washington and Cole Smith from Nashville. I thought Barry Trotz and Nashville made out pretty well with the guys they gave up. They kept Stamkos, they kept Marchessault, they kept Ryan O'Reilly, they kept all those guys. They moved some depth pieces, and they got a second-round pick for Michael McCarron, who's your fourth-line center, perhaps. But so that I thought that was some good GM craft there. Not going to get to all these. Edmonton with adding Jason Dickinson and Connor Murphy from Chicago in two separate deals. Add some depth pieces. Murphy will help the penalty kill there. He was part of that top-ranked penalty kill in Chicago. Colorado arming up. If you look within the Central Division, Nazem Kadri from Calgary for a first, a second, a prospect, and Victor Olofsson. They take Nick Waugh from Toronto for a first and a fifth, Nick Blankenberg from Nashville. No first-round picks for the Avalanche the next 3 years. They have one pick in the next 2 rounds, the next 3 years, and they don't care.
And they're going all in again, as you'd expect. And Bill Armstrong said it in his media availability right after the deadline in Philly, Mike. Best division in hockey, Central Division, Colorado. Overly active. Minnesota just kept making deals, starting with Quinn Hughes in December. Dallas was wheeling and dealing, bringing in players like Tyler Myers and Michael Bunting.
Yeah.
So the division was active, and I think the Mammoth are really, really happy with what they got in Mackenzie Weegar.
We'll get to Columbus real quick here at the end, but before we do, Adrian, did you have any like big winners, big losers from the deadline that you wanted to touch on?
You said Colorado. I mean, can you argue with one thing that they did, going all in? Minnesota going all in. Dallas. I mean, Mike, it's the best division in hockey. They might have just had the best trade deadline in hockey as well. The Central Division.
I think Colorado, with Kadri in the mix, they definitely added the most, and they should be really good down the middle of the ice now. I mean, geez, you factor in Brock Nelson and McKinnon and Kadri and Waugh, like that is a murderer's row down the spine of that group. So an already very good team got even better. Vegas nibbles on the edges a little bit. Cole Smith, Nick Dowd. And those are kind of the notable ones I had out west. I thought Buffalo's moves were weird. I think those were the ones I didn't make sense of the most. I don't know how much better they got. I think they added 4 guys who might not even be in the lineup for them on a nightly basis. But we'll see.
LA going from buyer to seller to buyer to seller. They brought in Artemi Panarin to start all of this. And Bill Armstrong made a great point today, Mike, as well, talking about, you play 60 games with a team and then you start bringing in other pieces. He says very rarely does it win a Stanley Cup, which I thought was a very astute point, because you've got one Stanley Cup winner, but Bill, with the trade of Sergachev and Peterka, he's always been big. You make your moves in the offseason, you've got the full runway versus assembling on the fly with 20 games left. And for the Mammoth, we know that these 20 games are going to be played in less than 6 weeks. So it's a haul, not a lot of practice time. You're going, you gotta mix it in fast.
No, great points. Bill did touch on Nick Schmaltz and progress there. Let's cut to that clip, then let's get to Columbus.
We make progress every day. I feel comfortable and confident that Nick's going to be a Mammoth, and we'll continue to work with that the same way as we continue to get Gunther's deal done and Cooley's deal. We have a way that we negotiate with the players, and like I always talked about, it's a soul of the player we don't want to cross, and I feel comfortable and confident that we're going to make progress. I think he's grown up with us. Since I've been here, he's earned my respect, I think, just by the way that he has matured, not only off the ice in his training and his preparation, which is now filtered onto the ice, of the consistency. He's a unique player in the sense that he can play wing and center and be good at both. I think he's always had good drive. He's won a national championship, but I think as you mature, and your years go by, and you start looking at, hey, how many years do I have left to play? Now this is important to not only get in the playoffs, but win in the playoffs. And he's bought into that 100%. So that's probably the best way I could answer that.
Bill Armstrong being diplomatic, Adrian, with that answer, talking about Nick Schmaltz, but seemed optimistic, which is a sentiment I don't know we had heard voiced out loud previous to this. So good to hear there between Armstrong and Schmaltz's camp. Columbus Blue Jackets tonight, Adrian. We're not going to do a full breakdown because I've got a dinner reservation with Nick Olchek.
and I'm heading to Top Golf with my brother and my nephew. So We're flying, folks, which is why you just got This Is Mammoth Daily at the open of the podcast. Didn't have time for the open.
Let's get to the Blue Jackets, who, AD, have been a totally different team ever since Rick Bowness took over as the head coach. They've been one of the best teams in the NHL. They're still outside of the playoffs looking in, but they're only 1 point back as we record this on Friday night. And this is going to be the third straight team in the Eastern Conference that Utah is playing that's on the outside looking in and is playing with that desperation.
And Mike, you looked at Washington dealing John Carlson, who we played on Tuesday night, and trading Nick Dowd away. You look at Philly made a couple deals to, kind of move in a different direction. Columbus was buying. They brought in Mason Marchment from Seattle, 17 points in 19 games. He did get hurt in the game against Florida on Thursday, so we don't have a status of him. They went out and got Connor Garland from the Vancouver Canucks. So there's a top 6 forward that Columbus is adding. And Mike, they had some unrestricted free agents that they could have moved, but they're going all in with Rick Bowness. They've played well. They came so close last year, Mike, as we've talked about, and looking for a big second half run here after missing by just 2 points last year. So Columbus with Coyle, Jenner, and Mason Marchment as unrestricted free agents at the end of the year. They are buying, and the Mammoth will be headed there. Mike, that stretch that Columbus started at the Delta Center on January 11th, they'd just come from Colorado. They lost 4-0. That win is what got them going to that 12-2-1 mark that you have on the graphic there. They fired Dean Evison the next day, and Rick Bowness took over, and that's where they are since. So that game against the Mammoth kind of got them going into this hot stretch.
Ever since Bowness took over, they've been top 10 both offensively and defensively in terms of goals for, goals against, where before Bowness arrived, they were in the 20s, in the late 20s out of 32 teams in terms of rankings. So they've seen their numbers tick up in a big way. They've been scoring a heck of a lot more goals, allowing just 2.5 goals against per game ever since Bowness took over in mid-January. So Utah has gone to overtime, what now? Twice against Columbus, 3 times, dating back to last year. Has it been all 3 meetings?
All three.
Yeah. There you go. Zach Werenski, their star defenseman, has been out the last 3 games due to illness. So haven't heard anything about his status for Saturday night, but usually you don't miss more than a couple games with an illness. So I'm expecting him to play. I put my stethoscope on and I checked him out. He's going to be good to go. So excuse me. You can I would anticipate him being in the lineup. You mentioned Marchment being out. He's been really good for him when he's been in the lineup. But this is a team that, is as dangerous as last year's team was. Very, very close, and they can taste it. They're determined here not to let another opportunity to make the playoffs slip away.
And the Friday update from Bill Armstrong was nothing serious on Mikhail Sergachev day-to-day with that lower body injury that caused him to miss the game on Thursday night in Philly.
All right, AD, let's wrap things up and get people on their way. Glad we snuck this one in, but just wanted to touch on the trade deadline and kind of catch everybody up to speed. So we're just playing hockey now. We're just we're lining up, dropping the puck, and pushing towards the postseason. Mammoth 3 games up on Seattle in the wild card race, or amidst the 2 wild card teams looking to extend the winning streak and extend that lead in wild card 1. When we drop the puck at Nationwide Arena coming up on Saturday. Thanks, AD.